I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. We ain't here.
Yo, yo, yo. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. This is the Chop Up. This is your girl Toya G. More specifically, happy to rock with y'all. We done pushed right on through this little January thing. Don't look now, but we already a month into it. And I mean, honestly, it's been a slow January because it's been a lot going on. I don't know, fast, slow. It's just been a lot. January has a lot to speak of. You know what I'm saying? So
You
I,
on
I
mute?
don't.
I'm on your mic. Ain't
Yeah.
me.
Look, slow mean don't ain't nothing happening.
Yeah, that's what I'm
We
saying.
Okay.
Slow.
we can't say this shit ain't been
I
slow at
just,
all.
but no, I wake up and it's still January. So much has happened, and you just like it's not
Nah,
even February, and like
long, huh? It's been a
you
long January.
know, Iran. It's still stuff going on in Gaza. It's of course stuff going on in the United States, Venezuela.
Mhm.
Like it's just for it to
Green.
still be January, it's just like, golly, we've lived many lives, you know? So either way it goes, I'm happy to be living life with y'all. I'm not by myself, I'm with my dogs. The one with the hat on, go ahead, tap in with the people.
What's good? It's the political plug. Y'all know what's up. Let's get it.
Indeed. The one with the locks, go ahead and talk to him.
Yes, man. It is I, the conscious Lee. Don't forget the Lee. I need y'all help too. I'm trying to win this NAACP Image Award. You can vote for me every single day until February 13th. We're gonna be finding out the awards at the end of February. But just do me a friendly favor. I'm gonna drop the link in the chat. You're able to click that chat and just make sure you vote. And then remind your friend, your mom and them to vote for your favorite digital content creator in politics and culture.
Man, tonight our conversation is multifaceted, got a couple levels, got a couple layers to it. Hopefully we will find ourselves both in agreement and probably in contention about some of these things. I'll
About a
go
few
ahead and put the
things.
cat out of the bag. We're talking about good old fashioned democracy, something that is both the foundation and the backdrop of a lot of the conversations we having right now. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do we participate in it? Should we participate in it, especially now? Should we have ever bought into it in the first place? Did you? It's just a lot of stuff, right, that we want to unpack and get into. Lee is kind of going to person that conversation and lead and guide it. So without further ado, the conscious Lee, go ahead and talk to the people and really lay the groundwork for how we are approaching this large meta concept of democracy.
Yes. So the core question that we're gonna be starting with.
Can I stop before you even your core question? Before we can even get to a core question, Cynthia Johnson has already dropped a super chat in the conversation, voted for Lee, pushing through to the NAACP conversation. So I just wanted to just appreciate the fact that before we can even get thick into the substance of it, it's already people showing love. Thank you so much, Cynthia Johnson. Thank you so much for pushing Lee further into the NAACP poll, and that's something that's important to us here. So I just want to kind of say thank you. It's just my manners got in the way. I apologize. I was rude to you because I had to be polite to the
Nah,
chat.
we appreciate you, Cynthia. You
By the
your
way,
appreciate on Chop Up.
1000%. Everybody else jump in the chat. You don't need a super chat, but we would love to know that you in the building, that you part of the conversation. Who are you? Where are you from? What's going on? Talk to us, slide in. And Lee, I return it back over to you.
Yeah. So today the core question we asking, man, is democracy inherently flawed or is it worth saving? It's a concept that we've heard about throughout 2024, throughout 2023, and really to now, talking about saving democracy, talking about protecting democracy. I don't want to just throw the word around. So we all on the same page. When I say democracy, I'm talking about a system of government by the whole population or ineligible members of a state that's typically through the elected representatives. In the history of democracy, I think it's important that we think about when we talk about and contextualize democracy in terms of its origins and who created it, why they created it, and kind of the mindset that was behind it. Democracy was developed by the ancient Greeks, primarily in Athens, around 508 BC. The Athenian politician Cleisthenes, I had it right too. But you can Google, you know what I'm saying? My my motto, research over me search, go look it
What
up. You
is
can
it?
tell
It's
me
Cleisthenes. Cleisthenes.
Cleisthenes.
Yeah.
Cleisthenes. That's right. The Athenian politician Cleisthenes is widely regarded to as the father of Athenian democracy, and he
Hold
restructured
on,
it.
hold on. We can't just talk about Cleisthenes without talking about Solon though.
I'm gonna get
And
this line, but
okay,
yeah,
go yeah.
no. I'm curious on how you kid you present it. What you
Well, not so. Solon is the one who made the Athenian democracy possible by introducing the reforms that would later turn into what we know as the Athenian democracy. And the interesting part about it, now this is known as what you call a folk origin, is that according to Herodotus, the Greek historian, now his shit ain't always considered always factual, but this is one of the stories that Herodotus told, is that in order to understand how to quell some of the infighting that was happening in Greece, he traveled to different places, including Egypt, where he met the pharaoh of the Scythe dynasty, and saw that the multiple tribes that existed in Sai at the time were able to kind of come together and culminate into one not necessarily one government, but a unified front under the I forget who the pharaoh was of the Scythe dynasty, but he saw that by allowing the people to be involved in how things were established, and not just having like the iron fist of a ruler, he saw that actually made it easier for different groups to interact and to exist under one umbrella if they all had some way to contribute to what was going on. And so when Solon took that back to Athens, he introduced concepts of like removed heredity from being able to vote, like, so who your parents was, it was like, nah, you still have to be an oligarch, right? You landowners, that type of stuff. But you start to see the possibility of democracy forming with Solon and his reforms.
Definitely. And that's why I pick up with Solon, Cleisthenes, all their put like this. From the beginning, the concept of democracy, it has always been limited. In the beginning, it was limited to 30,000 adult male citizens that excluded women, slaves, and foreigners who comprised majority of the population. So when it comes to just posing this first conversation or this first discussion question, when it comes to the ideals of democracy and the reality of democracy, first sit with that. Do you think there is a contradiction with the ideas of reality? I mean, the ideas of democracy and the reality of democracy, or is it something that we just striving for?
I mean, I say the contradiction isn't in the philosophy itself, right? Because one, there's a reason why we don't have like pure democracies, right? Where like everybody just votes on everything. You feel me? But I do think that there's certain when it comes to the bureaucracy of government, there are certain limitations that's always going to exist. You know what I'm saying? Like, and those limitations don't necessarily create hypocrisy. The hypocrisy you talking about stems from the way that the United States specifically, I know we're going to talk more about that, but the way that the United States specifically preaches democracy while at the same time limiting the rights of some. And so if you look at it just from the concept of the people being involved in governance, I don't think that in and of itself creates any hypocrisy, right? Like the hypocrisy or the I mean, because I don't even necessarily want to call it a hypocrisy, but the limitations of democracy show up in the limitations of government and the limitations of bureaucracy. You feel me? And biases and other things start to play a role in what the democracy looks like based on the institution itself, based on the culture of the people, right? It's all these other factors that play a larger role into how we understand democracy other than the concept. But I think generally the concept of people having a say or having influence in how a government functions, I think in and of itself, it doesn't create those contradictions.
Shout out to Des from Guatemala. Shout out to Guatemala in the building. Also, shout out to Loki for popping up in the chat. Go ahead and keep filling up the chat and making sure y'all tap in with us throughout this conversation. Restate the question so that I can make sure I answer it with precision.
Is there a contradiction between the ideas of democracy and the reality of democracy? And I guess I should preface it with especially given that from the beginning of its conception, it was never intended to account for all people. Like it was only intended to account for men, property, before we get to America, when we in Athens, you know what I'm saying? We're talking about it allowed for 30,000 men to participate, and no women, no slaves, no foreigners were allowed to participate. This is the beginning of democracy. I'm asking, the question is, the reality of democracy contradict with the ideas, especially given its inception?
I mean, I think 1000%. And what is interesting is like that contradiction is one, and I don't know, because you're trying to kind of keep me there, and like as an ideal, right? As a like an orientation toward like a catalyst toward designing civil society, right? I feel like shout out to Finally Catching Alive, Lee back in the building, somebody you connected with, fam, definitely tapping in to see what's good. But I think, you know, when we talk about its potential, I think in order to develop an organized civil society, to have everybody have a vested interest in its development and have people who have the means, right? Because you talked about the oligarchies or the people who have power and stuff like that really kind of being the guinea pigs for the democratic experiment in Athens, right? As far as that being kind of the nature of what has to happen, I get it. Right, you have to have, and this is we you know a church concept that I've become familiar with, but stewardship, right, and invested interest, right, and an equal interest, even if it's not necessarily yours, capital Y. This feeling as though what we have, what we're building, is yours, and so you become protective of it, right? This means that you value the conversations about it, right? Let's go back into Athenian politics. You have people, you know, coming into the agora. The agora was the city center, right? The epicenter of democratic decision making and conversations. We had to make decisions about where the poop goes, right? Where do we poop in, and but where does it go? We can't put it over here with the near the vegetation. We can't put it over here next to our animals. We can't put it next to the water source. So we have to have a collective conversation about what logically, right, using reasoning, using proof, using argument. Now, right now I'm getting my communication studies bag, right, to really even share meaning about what it means to live in a shared society, right? So you need democracy because it becomes an important mechanism, right, to make meaning out of communication. I said what I mean. How do you feel about that? Right? Are we going to do it or not? Is it, because these are questions of life and death. You move from that to what do we do with the children? You have these tiny humans that are stupid, that are weak, that are incapable, they're running all over the place more often than not. As we try to develop civil society, they in the way, right? So we have to make decisions about what it is and how we develop children. What do we develop them for? What purpose and what intent? With what ideology? With what framework? And so I say all these things to say, right? Like, yes, the foundations of what democracy is and what was possible, the potential in it is very solid, but it does become contrary to, as we see as many iterations, what it means to truly represent the total and the all. Because what happens if I have a vested interest in community, but I'm seen as the least of them? Yeah. Then do I really have the ability to say something when you got old money, you got family money, you got generational money, and I just, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know. It gets complicated, but there's value to the vision for what that particular organizational structure is possible. What's in it?
All right, so I guess I'll make it controversial. Fuck it.
This early?
Yeah, fuck it.
Go for it.
I mean, because I think in what's presupposed in George's question is who should, like, the idea that, okay, democracy is supposed to allow the people to be included, but then there are people who are
never meant to be included. They were never meant to be included.
I don't necessarily think the exclusion part is the problem. I think it's how we understand exclusion that becomes the problem. Hear me out.
I'm trying.
This may sound fucked up, right? But as somebody who has a lot of political conversations, and people just like to, elicit their political opinion to me, you know what I'm saying, oftentimes. And a lot of times when I'm having these conversations with people and it gets to voting, after they express all of these political opinions, then they be like, but I don't vote. And a part of me is actually comforted by that based on what their political beliefs are. Because at the end of the day, yeah. Like, no, but because I'm saying though, like, think about it. Like, the question of exclusion, especially for Black people, that's a hard word for us to hear. And I get that. Right, but we can also look at things like screening as well, because every contribution isn't a productive contribution. Like if you think
I feel like I can respectfully. I want to cut you off and ask you a question.
okay,
Is exclusion in opposition to democracy?
no, not necessarily.
So
Not
we
necessarily.
can't have democracy in a world where people are excluded.
Yeah, because I think we, even though exclusion and discrimination have some parallels where they intersect. In some instances, right? Like what if we, instead of said exclusion, we said screen, right? It's like because I mean,
we ain't even got that conversation, but I think that you already illustrating to me right now. Wow, I feel like it's being illustrated, the inherent contradiction or the inherent tension between humanity and being able to account for humanity and being able to say inclusion of humanity and being able to say, but screening, it ain't really exclusion, it's screening. This is what I'm gonna say, keep conversation going on. When we start talking about history, and we say Athens, but I'm gonna hear from you about this. When we say Athens,
yeah.
in your response to it, I want to hear, how do you position Athens in terms of like civilization history? We always talk about the history of civilization. We know it does not start in Athens. We know it does not start with Greece.
Remember that we're talking Western civilization. Western, because
Western
civilization existed, right? But Western, yeah.
Western civilization doesn't start with it either. So I'm just curious to how you position that in this idea of democracy. Because you wasn't gonna say something, I cut you off.
You talking to me?
Yeah, I was talking. Yeah, so I cut you off definitely. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. You forgot.
Yeah, I don't even remember what I was about to say. I don't. I don't remember what I was about to say. Sorry. So yeah.
Okay. Well, easing on down the road. Easing on down.
Hold on. While Toya think about that, let me clean this up real quick. Right. Let me clean this up, because as a DEI professional, you know what I'm saying, as a DEI advocate, I do think that we should make more things accessible. But when the distinction between screening and discrimination has more to do with what determines how somebody's qualified. How we understand, like, for example, during Jim Crow South, right? They were screening by being like, count the jelly beans, but they were the way that they view black people was based on their intelligence, like was that they're black, so they're not intelligent enough and they shouldn't be involved, right?
Sure.
But like, for example, if you have people who believe a lot of the shit that MAGA believe, these motherfuckers shouldn't be casting a ballot, because look at the result of it. Especially when you have a voting populace that'll literally cast a ballot that's detrimental to their own interests. Like I was just having this conversation with some other niggas yesterday, to where it's like, it's this book, like, what's the problem with Kansas or something like that. But the premise of the book is that poor white voters routinely vote against their own economic interests in order to maintain cultural values. That's dumb as fuck. Not only does your ballot hurt other people, your ballot hurts yourself. It hurts you.
But to me, like, why is that not to me, this should be like almost twofold, right? The first is like, on the surface level, I see what you're getting at, but the hubris of your argument is why the founding fathers, quote unquote, democracy, believed that women and slaves and foreigners shouldn't vote because their ideology, because they're dumb, because they don't have the capacity.
But I disagree. I don't think it was because of their ideology, though. I think it was because they were women. I think it was because they were women.
And they believed those women were inherently stupid.
Right, but if you're a voter, and like, remember that the 20v1 with or the surrounded with Mehdi Hassan, when you had the conservative nigga that was like, yeah, I'm pro-fascist. Hold your horses. You feel me? Niggas in Germany can't attempt to run for office as a Nazi because they know what Nazism does. You can't run up in there. You can't introduce these, when we allow the introduction of ideologies that actually undermine the democratic practices. Like when you have people that saying, I'm willing to vote for anti-democratic shit. That's dangerous. That does more to under. That is more of a contradiction. Whiteness creates a contradiction, more of the contradiction with democracy than democracy itself.
I think that we always give a lot of credit to Europeans for the way that we think about governance. And I think that a lot of times we start talking about democracy and we do it through a romanticized lens. I think what we're really talking about is collective governance. And we think that the concept of democracy is cornered the market on what we call on the concept of collective governance. What we know is that collective governance was happening well before Athens and well before, you know what I'm saying, the idea of Greece came about. We know in Mesopotamia. And what we know, think about this though, these ideas though, their collective governance was seen as not only being inferior, but as a reason for the Greeks to dominate them because they had a better form of governance. So when we start thinking about screening, I like how Jeffrey put it in the comment section right here. You feel me? It's that it's not because the ideology. The women are not being able to vote because their identity. The foreigners came up because their identity. So even now, your example, though it fits, you know what I'm saying, smooth in terms of ethics, like, yeah, you a fascist, I don't want to hear what you got to say. I don't want to hear you contributing to the government either. This still fits in the intended model of democracy. Is like, yeah, everybody ain't supposed to vote. In this instance, you were saying like, they ain't supposed to vote, but think about it. The founding father of democracy said no women, no slaves, no foreigners.
Right, but again, once you admit that the concept of allowing people like the people to be involved in governance, once you admit that even existed before we called it democracy, then even like we can still call shit that existed outside of Athens or before Athens democracy anachronistically because the principle is the same. And if we're talking about the principle, we've seen that principle play roles in other places that wasn't dictated specifically by, because one, even our democracy is more of a republic, right? Like even how our shit is set up is to be like, we pick the people that then ends up making decisions in government. That's how our shit is. That's how we understand democracy anyway. More of a republic, but a republic that is established based off of democratic principles. So when we're already saying that we're giving individuals the ability to make decisions on our behalf in government, right? Like how we think about who should be in charge plays a large role in what votes, like how we should look at who should be voting. You know what I'm saying? Like a large part of the problem that I see, again, when we talk about systems, like for example, like democracy, the problem has always been the people who were in control of it. The problem has always been the people who have branded it. Because once we recognize that these concepts go beyond Athens, go beyond the Greeks, go beyond Clothinius, whatever his name was, George got me fucking it up. Then we have to recognize that the thing that we have the bigger issue with is how who's allowed to vote gets decided. That's like, because again, when you say, oh, well, they had a democracy where women couldn't vote, that's because they had a fucked up perception of women. Not because of what women could contribute, but because they had a fucked up perception of women. They had a fucked up perception of black people. But I
would argue that fucked up perception is baked into democracy. Every democracy that we can see in the world always has that certain subordination towards women because that residue of women not having the capacity to be able to vote is baked into the concept of democracy. It's the reason why white men right now feel like they're trying to return it back to the roots. They trying to return it back to the roots of the founding father. What's my question to you, Toy? I think right now we'll be getting at is the hypocrisy versus aspiration. We know that the Declaration of Independence stated that all men are created equal. Yet America was built on slavery and systemic exclusion. Do we see this gap as fundamental hypocrisy that undermines the legitimacy of democracy? Or do we see it as a founding aspiration that we can power ourselves towards something better because we're able to get past, slavery or get past, or we can strive towards all people being seen as equal?
I don't know. I feel like people mean what they say and say what they mean. And even in the phrase you said yourself, all men are created equal, kind of does the demonstrating and the performing of the critique that you just talked about a moment, how it's kind of baked into the cake, into the fabric, because people have two parents, right? these same people who develop these laws are familiar with the stories of Adam and Eve, who know how integral the woman is to the literal, fortification of the human race, of what it means to have life. And still there are decisions to focus on what men and what masculinity can contribute, right? And so when you have the same people who are holding the church services and leading them, also making decisions about enslavement, also making these laws and policies, right, you kind of have the proof in the pudding of the default de facto exclusion that will be kind of part and parcel with it. I think the aspirational component of it is weird. And I think the thing that I wonder is what point in history, because I don't really know, we really, I don't know. I mean, because I think that might be a silly question. Like well, just like at what point in history did that just be like get off the table? Like just not be an option for us to really make it worth it to aspire toward democracy? At what point was it too far gone? At what point was the project and the experiment like just like it's done? Like this is the proof. This is the straw that broke humanity's the camel on Americans' version of democracy's camel's back. It makes it irredemptive in a way that is silly. The reason why I was like, well, this is illogical is because I think the imminence of slavery, right? The decision to create moments of modernity where we literally have a separated, like easy to pinpoint fissure in what it means to be human, right? Is like the perfect kind of example of how democracy was off the table from the get-go, right? And so the origins of this country kind of make whatever democracy was supposed to be very convoluted, very contrived, very funky, stanky, nasty, right? If you will, because you go from everything to, you know what I'm saying, the three, like, the notion that we are, you know what I'm saying, three-fourths human to, you know what I'm saying, the ways we look at, like, it's just so many examples of how
3/5 of a
democracy,
yeah.
It's just so many historical examples of how democracy was never just in the cards for some people off rips. And so it's hard to play these aspirational games as a Black person who is, versed in even, we were objects on the chessboard of democracy, right? We were pieces to be moved around. People were able to make democratic decisions about what to do with us as property, what to do with us as chattel, right? That was our role in democracy in its imminence. We were never designed. We were to come over here and be a part of somebody's land, be a part of somebody's property, be a part of somebody's capitalistic enterprise. It was never for us to kind of speak ourselves. So I don't really know. And then double that at my intersections, and then triple that because I'm a queer, and then quadruple that because you know what I'm saying. Like,
but it was, but I think though,
never designed.
Y'all are making my point though. Like when we say, like, because George, you're framing it as if that this inherent bias is baked into the concept of democracy. No, yeah. The bias is baked into the ideology of the people who are attempting to employ or deploy democracy, the people that's trying to use democracy. So of course, in a world where you have a racist, right, ain't no form of government gonna be productive for the people that those racists are against, because it's racists that's running it. So it's like, regardless of whether it's democracy or anything else, it is a question of the ideology that shapes how people are viewed in that system, period. But because if we're taking the concept of people being involved in governance, right? Because before, when we think about the ways that shit function before the concept of democracy was involved, it was whoever was in charge was dictated by whatever, you know what I'm saying, whether it was God or whether it was, who your parents was, whatever. How control was dictated and embedded in these restraints that made it to where the majority of people couldn't be involved at all. So then somebody was like, what if, right, the people had a say? The only issue that pops up when we say, what if the people had a say, is how that person views people, not the idea of people having a say. That's the distinction.
Here's where here's where I almost agree with the plug, and I'm gonna tell you why. I'm gonna contextualize it in the context of debate. Back in the day, I used to coach my students in response to anti-Blackness arguments, right? That wanted to really situate the transatlantic slave trade is this like pivotal time where systems and structures and institutions in this particular civil society were irredeemable, the state, the police, etc. I would make an argument that was basically rooted in the concept of Sankofa, right? It is not that Black people need to align themselves and capitulate to the frameworks of the state or of power structures that have worked to oppress them. It is that they should not, appeal to ones that are framed within kind of this Western consciousness. Instead, we should go back and fetch it, right, if you will, and look at the ways that civilized societies were organized from the continent, right? So the continent had police. You couldn't just run amok on the continent. You couldn't go between different nations, different tribes, and you pick one. You couldn't just go and steal shit. You was going to pay for that. You couldn't go and just murder people. It was going to be a penalty for that. But you didn't have the foundation and the backdrop of anti-Blackness, of whiteness, of white supremacy to become the metric of violence or the mechanism of violence, nor the standard of orienting that society. So you had justice. You had justice in some of its purest forms. Now, this is not to say it wasn't with this other issues with women, right? It's other issues with outsiders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those systems are probably imperfect too, but we argue or would argue that it is not order that is bad. It is not institutions. It is the bastardization of those processes by the appendages of anti-Blackness and white supremacy that make that shit toxic. So that is in alignment with what the plug says when it's like, and I hate to use this rhetoric, but it is what, gun enthusiasts say. It's not the gun, it's the shooter, right? It is like, and these are the preponderances of the questions.
I was working so hard to not say that.
I hate it, but just to kind of like bring it, because there's a reason we haven't common sense gun laws and shit like that, but there's a reason we haven't had totalizing yes gun, no gun policies here, is because to an extent that shit is kind of true, right? It's just can't over explain, right, the emboldenment, the empowerment of some different people and the lack of common sense regulations about shit that can just wipe out a bunch of people. That's a conversation for a separate day, but I tend to, at least I'm able to fathom what it is that you mean when you say the system, objectively, the way that we organize the thoughts, perspectives, needs, desires of a large group of people is not necessarily bad. It's how we practice it. It is also what I've been sitting over here thinking about. One of the reasons that one of the fundamental kind of systems of organizing we're given as children is democracy. Raise your hand if you want to have a pizza party or watch a movie. Raise your hand. Do y'all want to have outside recess or do y'all want to stay inside and play games? Right? We have been introduced to this model of what meaningful inclusion and participation, equitable participation in decision making is supposed to look like. But somewhere along the way, right, the older we got, the more contrived our ability to participate in democracies has become, right? Like back then when it was just like, do we want to have a pizza party or a skating party? We just counted it up. 12 people said yes. 14 people said no, it looks like, or 14 people said pizza, 12 people said this, it looked like we having pizza, right? So, but over time, our ability to participate in democracy get a whole lot more shady, right? You go to work and they like, all right, so who want to open, who want to close, vote for this, that, and the other, and people got in cahoots with the manager and they besties and shit like that, and then you start seeing like, nigga, my vote never mattered. Y'all got backdoor politics, you know what I'm saying? We start seeing it very early. Then we start seeing it in our voting systems. Then we start seeing it where just shitty people, right, don't really let just the vote be the vote. It is always kind of convoluted with some backdoor business with some shady dealings. Now you add in that bigotry, you add into that, you know what I'm saying, an insatiable appetite to like commodify people and exploit, then you got a fucked up system.
Because look, because if we use,
but that system.
Let me just say this. Real quick.
They voted for the pizza party. I love that.
That's on. If we just use the example of the pizza party. And it's just like, all right, raise your hand if y'all want pepperoni, raise your hand if y'all want cheese. If the majority of people say that they want pepperoni and the class has pepperoni, you can't say that decision was based on any type of bias, because more people said they wanted that, right? The issue is when you say who want pepperoni and who want cheese, and all the kids with white shoes, y'all don't get to decide. Just all the kids with shoes with color, y'all all get to pick. Now we have issues. But
that's that is literally everything that y'all are talking about. To me, it's the utopian idea literally of what we are taught to democracy to be. But when Clinthenius or Solo was talking about democracy, it never was intended for women to be able to say they want pizza. We don't care if you want pizza or not. So this idea of humans, which humans are we talking about? Even this.
But how do you blame that on democracy though?
when we start talking about human history and we start talking about Western civilization, I know with my master's degree in human relations that Western civilization starts to go much, much more west. It starts in Mesopotamia, and all of a sudden it ends up in Greece. So when we start talking about civilization and think about democracy, it's something always about anything that came before Athens is seen as being uncivilized, and literally the democracy is seen as a tool that brings the civilization. So we start talking about just gender, not race, just gender. I would argue that from the conception, the idea, the father of democracy was never intended for women people to be a part of it. This idea of this nebulous, neutral, objective people, I don't understand it. Especially
but that's a question of that nigga. That's a question of that nigga. Like, think about it. So
hold on. That nigga is the reason why we like that nigga. These people we can't pronounce their names. They came with these concepts. They came with the concept. Like they came with the concept. And it wasn't, again, y'all saying people. It's important for everybody watching, and y'all too. The people that developed, the person that developed democracy never intended for all the people that we say should be a part of it to be a part of it. Slaves, foreigners, women. Right now in America, who's not getting access to democracy? Slaves, foreigners, women. And
they don't.
How?
Okay.
How?
Okay.
How? Shit, how?
The reason why that's not an issue of democracy is if somebody like consciously,
I think. Hold on, I want to be clear. I think the pizza example is an example of collective governance that the Athens would have called barbaristic, barbarian.
But that's why who gives a fuck? Like, but we talking about it today. So like we know that terms like civilization, barbarian, savage, right? We know that those terms have more to do with the dehumanization of non-white, non-European, non-Athenian people than it actually had to do with what those people did, right? Because we understand that in Africa you had decentralized government. If you look at ancient Igbo societies, I always pronounce that wrong. I don't know if the G is supposed to be silent.
Igbo.
If you look at those societies, they had decentralized power. They had decisions that were made through village assemblies, right? They had elders. They had women's councils. So we know that it's not a question of the system itself. It's a question of who gets to control it. For example, we know that when you have in the system of democracy, women were never intended to hold power in democracy. In Athens, they could in Nigeria though. They could in West Africa.
I'm gonna keep the conversation going right here. So when it comes to democracy, it's a tool of domination. When you understand that democracy has always been used as a tool to civilize. Before I read the question, I want to set this up real fast. We understand that the Athenian democratic concept and how it's practiced in Athens and how it is structured modern imperialism, there is a relationship. In this right here, I would argue that the creation of the civilization hierarchy comes from democratic nations positioning themselves as morally, politically advanced, granting them rhetorical right and to intervene and to guide and to impose systems on less developed states. So when we start talking about the West, the African examples, the founders of democracy believed that the collective governance they was doing in West Africa, East Africa, was uncivilized. This is a part of the concept of democracy. Here's the question now.
No, it's not. That was cheap. What you just did was cheap, bro. It was quick, and that would have got a nigga on TikTok. But
let's see.
My fault. Go ahead, Toya. Before I go.
Thank K.A. Muhammad for showing love, another super chat, loving the intelligent conversation. Also, the discussions about pizza. Tyler, I see you. Kay, I see you. Des, I see you. And also just great contributions overall. Your Fur says the idea of democracy was never intended for women as a cop-out and the progress to what democracy is in the modern day. So I know we are working through the roots of, democracy and what it looks like and, its potential as of now, like up to now, and if it even has any, especially now, right? What are we even talking about when we talk about democracy, i.e. what are we talking about in terms of waiting till November and whatever other, versions of the democratic promise we've been given now. But that is an interesting inference that I think I want to kind of look at and toss to you, Lee, as we move to some things. Because, Yeah, it was bad. Its origins is bad. Its roots is bad. But it's the same arguments we heard. Like the state done did some good things, right? The state, Emancipation Proclamation, the state, you know what I'm saying? Civil rights movement, the state did a whole lot of, you know, so is it completely always already irredeemable regardless of its foundations? It's a question we're going to float around. You can answer it or not, but I did want to kind of point that out because it caught my eye. Greens from Naptown. What's up, Campbell? What's good? Keep it cooking.
Yes, yes. So, but yeah, what you say, Dom?
So if when you because what I was calling out when you was like women not having a say was democracy, right? Yeah. The point I'm making is that you are giving the Athenians the extra credit that everybody else does, because I'm not willing to say that the only way that we should understand how a democracy was established or democratic principles is through Athens. Like if we just talk about women specifically, if we look at Igbo societies, the women's councils were specifically created to dissolve disputes, to regulate markets, shit going on along with the market. So there were many ways that other groups was like, nah, we not gonna be over each other like that. You gonna have a say in this type of way. The elders is gonna have a say in this type of way. Everybody's gonna be involved. So if you only use Western thought as a way to understand how collective governance function, then of course you're gonna say it.
I would argue democracy is Western thought. That's what I would argue.
How can you say that when you can recognize the collective governance and allowing the people to have a say in how governance happens?
It's not monopolize collective governance, because collective governance existed. It predates democracy, because we can acknowledge. To me, it
predates the term, though. You're saying it predates the term democracy. The concept is still.
We made a career out of debating root cause analysis and etymology. And now y'all sitting here telling me that the root of democracy and the etymology of democracy, it does not matter, because you can romanticize and utopian life. But it could though. It's like, but it didn't, and it's intended not to.
It only didn't when you view. But it only didn't when you view it through the lens of Western thought. That's my point. When you say the concept of democracy, hold on.
You are right now, though. You are behind on the flow. At the beginning of this, hold on. Refrain. Let me get in my bag real fast. At the beginning of this conversation, I gave you a historical analysis behind democracy and how it started in Athens. So now you being discursively not being real and bad faith, talking about Africa, you should have made that argument at the top of the flow. At the top of the flow, I made it clear.
You missed the argument. You dropped the argument, big dog. You too late. I did.
508 BC. 508 BC. Democracy was developed by ancient Greeks. There was no pushback. So now you're trying to go back and reinterpret. Is you are not being real. You're being intellectually fugazi, willy-nilly. You're being elusive right now. You defend the argument right now. Right now, what is democracy, Damo? Is democracy what the
okay? Democracy is a Greek term. Hold on. Democracy is a Greek term used to describe a particular system of governance. If we can agree that system of governance existed before the term was deployed, that means that Athens the Greeks don't control the concept, they control the term. We speak the English language. The English language is dictated and understood through Western thought. That means that when we say democracy, that's the language that we use to describe an ideology, even though the ideology is not specifically tied to the people who deployed the term.
This sounds like semantics, but I keep the conversation going.
It is semantics, nigga. That's the point. When you're saying that the semantics.
My argument is that democracy is nothing but semantics that make a whole bunch of niggas like Damo and in this instance Toya believe that if we get into the utopian idea,
the one time you on my side, he not real. He's not real.
In this instance, I'm disagreeing with both of y'all. We disagree. That's fine. Now I'm articulating my disagreement. And what I'm saying right here is simple in this instance. What I'm saying is that the way in which we understand democracy and the way even in which you start talking about 508 BC, when you start talking about 800 BC, and you're acknowledging that the concept or the term democracy is defined in, we start talking about something that predates it. We already go into modernity enough to understand there is no way for you to take a concept that predates a history and try to say, hey, we're going to talk about something that happened in year 500 to try to describe what happened in year 1300. It's like, that's not how that works.
Yeah, but we're not describing what happened. We're describing a ideology. We're describing an approach to governance. And what you're doing is you're saying that Western thought is able to capitalize the idea that people that the people should be involved in governance. When you what you're doing,
you coming from on this one, Damo. You I know you in epistemology, man. Let me ask you a question about epistemology.
Go ahead.
Do you think the epistemology of democracy is not patriarchal? Is
hold on, look, I thought you were bone. The epistemology of American democracy is patriarchal, of American democracy. But do you want to know why I say American democracy though? You know what I mean when I say American democracy? That means because when I say American democracy, I'm talking about the way in which democracy has been promoted and facilitated in the United States. And because we're talking about America, there are inherent biases that exist in how that democracy functions. However, as an epistemology man, because Lee, you're also an epistemology man. We students at Yancey. That's what, you know what I'm saying? That's what we go crazy for. We recognize that a part of decolonization mentally is breaking away from what we have been taught based on Western society and creating an understanding of concepts outside of the epistemology of whiteness, because we both recognize that there is an existence, there is validity of thought that exists outside of white epistemology. And what I'm saying is that when we don't give credit to the civilizations that introduced the types of principles that came to be known as democracy, what we're doing is we're doing the work of Western thought by erasing their validity. I'm saying that if we're going to think about democracy, we should go back to the pre-Greek thought, democratic thought that included women, that included different groups of whether you was a landowner or not, that included people of different ages, because that form of democracy is actually better. So if we're saying that that American democracy has created an issue for us, that it's created this contradiction, this hypocrisy that we should reject, then that doesn't mean you throw away the concept. That means that you question who taught you that concept, and is there another way to understand it?
What'd you say, Sawyer?
There's not a lot to be said. I think, the only thing that's been going through my mind is, the relevance. Like, oftentimes we would have root cause debates about, capitalism, for example. And it's like understanding, right? As much as I am giving credence, and you, Tyler, in the comments talking about some, and shout out to Trevor for being in the building and everybody else in the comments chatting. Tyler, justice for Dom, justice for me. Because the one time I kind of agree with the conscious Lee, I got cooked throughout, cut off, all of that. But the thing that has me sitting kind of on this fulcrum in both sides of this conversation is, yes, credit where credit is due. The root of democracy as we know it is stimulated by people in the Igbo tribe and folks across the continent of Africa who have very unique and sophisticated ways of organizing the people and governing both their politics and the ways that they existed in connection and relationship to other tribes, other villages, other groups of people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when we talk about what it means to mobilize and actualize democracy and the redeemability of the scalability of the productivity of democracy, what does it do? How does it help us to take it away from its roots in the Athenian kind of approach and framework when that is what has been replicated and duplicated in Western societies and in the United States inception, right? Like, yes, there's a better way to do it. There's a better version of it, but we don't experience that. So when I can't allow myself to be trapped in, because who are the people who need to actualize? We are already community oriented, right? Everything from mutual aid to, our orientation toward education and scholarship to the way we confront epistemology, we good, right? We're invested in these unique and dynamic ways of thinking, understanding, knowing, and getting inferences from different perspectives, different ideas, different ideologies to make us better, right? That's how we become the scholars we are. But the people who make the decision, the bottom liners, right, have no interest in replicating the models by which, you know, contemporary democracy really came from, which Damo points out very clearly, right? Like, so in a world where they have no interest, what does it do? How does it placate us? How does it satisfy us? How does it posture us to be successful when that's not the game being played? Those are the thoughts that I come to. Like, yes, it's relevant in the grander contextualization of what democracy is, but what does that framework do for us now when there are people who have played the game of Western democracy in such a way that means nothing to them, right? Sure. They don't see any value in that structure and in that orientation.
For sure. I think that the earlier in the conversation when Damo introduced Solo, I think it's important to make the distinction Solon democracy designed to balance the competing class interests in city-states within Athens, while African communalism, or what I was calling collective governments, is focused on maintaining consensus, and in some cases, always already accounting for the identities that the Athens democracy always said was supposed to be a part of it. So my frustration and what I'm articulating is that the very way that those African civilizations was formed, especially when it comes to their collective governments or their communalism, that what was used in terms of democracy to go civilize them. And this was bring me to the conversation of like democracy in terms of globalism. And I think that makes it where we have a better framing of I think pointing at the tension I'm trying to get at. So what I'm in the idea of how I thought this conversation is thinking about how democracy, how when it's promoted throughout world history, when democracy is promoted, it's a geopolitical tool that's used to shape the internal politics of other nations to allow for the European states or the states that see themselves closest to Europe to be able to do what they want to do. Now, here goes the question. The civilizing mission, the European imperialism, is often justified as a duty to bring civilization and governance or democracy to savage peoples. In what ways did American expansion and foreign policy adopt similar rhetoric and spread democracy to justify political domination?
All right, so you mind if my fault, Toy? I ain't trying to jump in front of you.
No, you smooth. Go for it.
Y'all remember when niggas was talking about that they teaching, not I say niggas, but y'all know when I say niggas, I'm talking people, right? Yeah. Like, yeah. Y'all know how the conversation a couple years ago about CRT, right? Or about woke, right? The people that we're critiquing was deploying that language of woke and CRT. And people who are woke, are actually woke, and people who actually study critical race theory was like, y'all have no idea what the fuck y'all are talking about. And y'all are using those terms as a way to be on some manipulative shit. That's the same thing that happens with democracy. We recognize that the term democracy is used to spread U.S. imperialism. The democratization the democratization efforts of Bill Clinton, the democratization efforts of George Bush, the democratization efforts of Barack Obama. Donald Trump don't give a fuck about democracy, so we can't include him. That nigga's like, we just taking people's sovereignty. We don't give a fuck about y'all shit anyway. Yes. But the democratization efforts of, he didn't have as many, but the democratization efforts of Joe Biden, right? We know that they use that language as a way for them to go in and introduce different markets and other shit for neoliberal control, neocolonialism as we understand it. So what the clash that we have in Lee is that I'm not giving them the democracy as the way that they frame it. Their democracy is a lie. We know we live in an oligarchy. We know we live in a country where while we vote, the people who have the most influence over politics are the people who's putting money in people's pockets. It's the lobbyists. It's the billionaire donors, right? Which undermines the principles of democracy because it was never supposed to be, money was never supposed to be free speech. That was a manipulation of the concept that we see happens when governance is being dictated by something other than taking care of people. As a political scholar, as somebody who looks at government as a necessary function, right? Like when we talk about society, when we talk about like how we exist in modernity, outside of the way governments function, we recognize that a guiding principle of different groups in a society requires some form. And I mean, shout out to all my anarchists, right? Because I'm thinking through all the critiques of the shit that I'm saying as I say it. But shout out to the anarchists. But when we think about society, even when we go back to the ancient African tribes and all those other things, there were governing principles, there were governing bodies. Our issue with governing bodies is who dictates the governance. It's not the idea of the government. Like, let me say this. Let me say this, and I'm gonna pass it. So, because the one thing that you forget, though, like we talked about at the beginning, you fucking up on the flow, is that Solon went to Egypt to understand how different entities and different groups can exist under a similar umbrella. That means
and then Solon took that very concept of democracy and said that the place that he learned it from was undemocratic to justify dominating them. Like
that came later. Hold on, no, if we're being historically accurate, that came later because Greece had a lot of respect for Egypt. Greece had a lot of respect. They may not have had a lot of respect for other motherfuckers in like the Ethiopians.
In a explorative, we're going to borrow concepts from you and then take credit for them, like Solo did.
So, I mean, that's what happened, bro. Like you talking about what happened.
Yes, I get, but I'm indicting and saying like this. We made arguments about social location, and we talked about how social location imposes your ideology and social locations imposes your politics. And if in order for me to understand your politics and understand your ideology, I gotta understand social location. In this instance, I'm saying that the social location of these forefathers of democracy, quote unquote, within Athens, they did it in a way that was always already discursively in opposition to what we see as African communalism or collective governance, as well as thinking about women. So me, I think that when it comes to with Solo or Clinton's, you know what I'm saying, we're saying it's like, yeah, we think that power and people being able to participate in government is important, but not the women and not the slaves and not the foreigners. Think about it. Athens at this time is seen as one of the pinnacles of world history at this time. So everybody has to come to Athens to trade. Everybody has to come to Athens to deal with capital. And they're saying that in order to be involved with government here is that I'm arguing that ideology has always been a core tenet of how democracy functions. And that from 582 BC to now, all the issues that we identified, I'm saying that we can take a line, you know what I'm saying, to say, which begs the question, is democracy inherently flawed, or is it an ideal we can always ascribe to? I think that in this question right here is even this. It's like I feel like democracy becomes the broke down house that has housed a bunch of people. You feel me? That has given, refuge and safety to a lot of families. But now that house is falling down. Now this house was built in 582 BC. Now we in 2026. The house it should be demolition, and we need a whole new thing. We got new innovation, we got new creativity, we got new technology, and to me, it's something about the how we cling to European ideas of governmentality and how that thing can always be made better. That's my beef with democracy, man. I'm being real with you. My beef with democracy is we always cling to it in a way that says that even though we've been able to innovate and advance every other thing, this mode of governmentality is the best we have. We can always make it better, but the idea of doing away with it is asinine. It's crazy. It's almost uncivilized. That's what I'm trying to like expose and trying to get at. Yeah, pretty much.
That makes a ton of sense. I don't really have an inference. I know we still got some more substance and conversations to have, and we've been on for about an hour. So, like, push to the next question.
Yeah, I start bringing it in. Now start bringing in more domestically, and talking about the criminalization of the democratic participation. Right now, we're talking about saving democracy and protecting democracy. Right now, here in America, especially against Trump and Trump's administration. Last week, I quoted Stokely Carmichael and talking about how all the bills that we've been given here in America, it wasn't to black people, it was to white people. Black people have been knowing that we can drink out of a water fountain. We've been knowing that we can vote. We've been knowing that we can go into a movie theater. The white folks didn't know. So they created policy to make it for them to be like, hey, white folks, niggas can vote. Niggas can drink out the water fountain. So he argued that the civil rights bills was not for black folks, that was for white folks. In this, I think that he's getting at the criminalization of participation in democracy, especially for black people. My question, you know what I'm saying, is this right here. I got the question right here is after the civil rights, after the Civil War, the 13th Amendment, it abolished slavery. how did this exception of slavery allow for the convict lease system? And how do we see this acceptance of slavery in the broader concept of democracy? Is democracy something that always allows for slavery, meaning slavery is democratic, or is slavery undemocratic? And this is just, you know what I'm saying, a glitch in the system that we can do something about. Because I started purposely talking about Athens and slavery being a part of it, and then getting to this, and then in my mind, slavery is a part of it. But I'm curious what y'all think.
So ask the question one more time. It was a long question from my perspective, so it had some pieces.
Yeah, simplified it. The exception that allows for slavery in the convict leasing system in the South and how it effectively re-enslaved Black people. Do we understand slavery as being a core tenet of democracy? Or is slavery just an accidental residue of democracy?
I mean, in the context of slavery and then its transformation into modern day, the modern day prison industrial complex, like I think we have to argue that slavery in some form or fashion is baked into the system, the structure, the format of democracy in an inextricable way. The reason why is that if that wasn't the case, then you wouldn't go through those systems, you wouldn't have those experiences and come back on the outside of it and be disqualified from voting and participating in democratic systems, right? So when I think about, you talking about the graduation of slavery into the prison industrial complex and to the corrective, the systems of correction that has been contextualized and legalized by the Constitution and by law, right? That, it's basically legal to be a slave if you are in prison. Then the next logical graduation of thought to me is to look at how you are suspended, how your democracy is suspended if you have the tinges of slavery on you, whether it be Black people and the connection and the legacy they have to Black ancestors and how that complicates their ability to vote, i.e. voter registration laws, voter ID laws, right? Any tinges, any residue of slavery on us has complicated our ability to participate in the system. Then you look at the neo form of slavery, which is imprisonment, and any residue from those experiences also complicate and disqualify you from participating in, the processes of democracy. So I think it is part and parcel and co-constitutive, right? You can't have slavery without without democracy. You can't have democracy without slavery.
Yeah, I wholly disagree with that. I think the problem that we always run into is that because we have such a defined enemy, our opposition has these labels and things that have structured society. It takes me back to Charles Burt, one of our favorite philosophers, where he talked about transcendence and facticity and how whiteness exists as transcendence, meaning it is the narrator of the world. Like whiteness provides the labels, which creates reality. When whiteness labels something, that concept is then inexplicably may not be the word, but it's intricately tied to
inextricably. It was very close.
You
couldn't explain the way that it was connected. The inextricable. I'm done. Carry on. Inextricable.
We did this from the country, man. We didn't read a lot, but just when words try to come out, sometimes that country. I'm from Kansas, y'all. That country just kind of just
in cahoots and colluded.
Cahooted like a
authored by the consciously.
I swear that makes sense in my mind. I didn't recognize that I didn't recognize what I said until you was like, you definitely made that up. I was like, damn. I was feeling it. It made sense to me in the moment.
I was impressed more than anything else. But inextricably linked.
Right. So again, when we because as much as we're epistemology people, we're also ontology people. Right? Yes. How do we understand being? So the existence of democracy as a concept is linked directly to, because of how we come, the society that we was socialized into and the society that taught us democracy. It creates a unique link between the concept of democracy and white control and white governance. But what we've always done as debaters, what we've done as intellects, is to break out of that understanding, because there is a understanding of these concepts outside of that. And so while I think if we're phrasing it like American democracy, you can't disconnect from slavery.
but like being real, I don't understand how you can say that when we are given the genealogy of democracy and we're showing you that even going to its exception from, you know what I'm saying, the Greeks, that they always already had slavery and they always already intended for slaves not to participate in that. Like that's a part of it, like literally a part of the history of democracy. When we go back to 582 BC, we understand that these people were never supposed to participate. Women, enslaved people, foreigners. So I don't get how you can make the statement.
They weren't supposed to participate in the eyes. They weren't supposed to participate in the eyes of Europeans. They weren't supposed to participate in the eyes of oppressors, in the eyes of people who saw other groups as fucked up. I get that.
In the eyes of the curators of democracy, in the eyes of the curators of democracy, slaves were not supposed to.
But Lee, that's where me and you disagree. I don't think they're the curators of democracy. They're just Western thought, and Western thought shapes how we understand these things. But if we are to break away from Western thought, because what you're saying is that there's no way to understand democracy outside of Western thought. That's what you're saying.
So I think.
But you also admit that the concept of democracy existed before the use of the term.
I'm making a Venn diagram. I think right now it's like saying you have a cold sore on your lip. It's like having, you feel me, the same thing as having, genital herpes. Not the same thing. Like saying having a fever is the same thing as having, you feel me, the flu. It's because to me, it's like, hey, you can have one of these things. It don't mean the other. What I understand is that the Athenian concept of democracy has always been defined in opposition to the forms of governmentality you and I like. So when it comes to African communalism, that African communalism was always seen as being uncivilized.
Can we not call that democracy, though? Can we not call that democracy? We can't call that democracy. And anachronistically, right? Anachronistically, can we call that democracy?
No.
Why not?
No.
The principle is the same.
Literally, no, it's not. No, it's not. Fam. Think about it. The concepts we're talking about also existed within Turtle Island with the indigenous folks. That concept through the epistemology of democracy, for some reason, when we have people of color, they have a collective governance. That collective governance is always seen as being uncivil. That's the reason why I'm sitting.
Two white people. I'm saying we don't have to use that.
Okay, now let's go back to Stokely Carmichael. It's our quote. If the white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. If the white man has the power to lynch me, that's my problem. Your distinction between two white people have the power to go imperialize. Hey, me and you can have ideas of democracy being communal and being collective governments, and nigga, we don't have the power. What the power? Power defines the ability to define the phenomenon. Come on, power. We're talking right now about ideology, but you're missing the power part. The power part.
No, I'm saying, but that's my point, Lee.
Like, hold on, one statement. Slavery has historically and consistently functioned as an engine for economic production in democracy. In the world history of democracy, slavery has historically and consistently functioned as an engine for the whole entire concept. Meaning that there is nowhere in world history, Damo, there's nowhere in world history you can point to and show me a iteration of democracy that is not co-constitutive of slavery. This is all Afro-pessimism. Literally, democracy equals civil society. You can't sit here and look me in my black eyes and tell.
No, bro. Because we recognize that even, and I'm sorry, up to you.
Yeah, Toy, what you think, Toy? What you think, Toy?
Go ahead, yeah.
Y'all be doing like back and forth for like 7-8 minutes and then be like, well, what do you think? I don't have shit to say. I'm watching, waiting for a new question, a moment to create an inference. I'm looking at the chat. It's a lot of people with a lot of takes in terms of how you all are kind of talking about things. So I definitely, maybe you all want to look at some of the comments. Yeah. But Damo seems to have some people on his side, and I think the majority of people on his side in terms of like the just feeling or the position, the perspective that democracy and slavery are not co-constitutive, that they are not inextricably linked, that they are not part and parcel with one another, because mostly a lot of people are saying, I think the role of capitalism and the ways that it plays, it's all about money and power. And so it is not intrinsically, inherently slavery, it being a part of the democratic vision. I think though, what Lee is saying that I'm kind of like attaching myself onto is it's about the mobilization and the operationalization of democracy, right? When we talk about what it means to have democracy, I think we've seen the examples of it, not the idealized versions of it, but the examples that we've seen of it always come at the expense or come down to a question of who can be exploited, right? To make that democracy be actualized, to make it real, even if it's not in the context of race, right? Because we're talking about how democracy and slavery existed before, chattel slavery, and how democracy existed in different ways, and different people had different entry points and out and exit points from it. But bottom line, in order to have civilized society, in order to have a democracy, you did always already have to have some population of people being exploited in order to have the organization and development of those societies. I think we have to kind of talk about, I think I'll leave it there. The chat has been making a lot of observations, and people tend to agree with Lee, although I mean, agree with the plug, although I understand what Lee is trying to say about how the reality, the application of, not just the idealized version of what these things were meant to be. The way that they've been experienced, they have always come at the expense of the exploitation of some otherized group of people, more likely than not, and especially when we talk about the democracy that we are familiar with, racialized people, particularly Black people.
Yeah, my question to people in the chat would be: when has democracy been absent to capitalism? I have never, as a historian, never known for democracy to exist outside of capitalism.
Outside of capitalism, like there are no democracy that exists without cap.
To me,
you said we seen these principles in Turtle Island. You said we seen these principles in Turtle Island.
We didn't see slavery. We didn't see slavery. That
proves my point. The connection between slavery and democracy is unique to Europeans. The connection between slavery and democracy is unique to Europeans.
And we started this conversation talking about who created democracy in terms of them. I don't get how you understand the Venn diagram. I don't get how you understand that we can have concepts of something that exists in both of these, and we have a middle with a similarity, but we have distinctions. So it's like, to me, is there not a distinction between African communalism and democracy? They're the same thing now?
Yes. The principle is the same. That's the point I'm making, is the principle is the same. And think about it like this. What the ability that we have as Black people, right? The uniqueness that we have as Black people is the ability to understand the way that the world is shaped. Shout out to W.E.B. Du Bois. The ability to understand how the world and the society that we live in creates meaning, but also the meaning that we create within ourselves based outside of that hegemonic understanding. So, for example, if we look at how we talk about Blackness, how with all of us, when we hear niggas be like, I don't call myself Black. That's a term that was created by the white man to make it seem like you know what I'm saying? What do we when we hear that shit, the first thing we think is white people ain't the only people who define how I understand Black. There is a cultural relevance of Blackness. There's a cultural understanding of Blackness that exists outside of what white people tell us what Blackness is. So the double consciousness gives us the ability to delineate between what society says a thing is and recognizing how real and the material impact that comes from how society shapes these terms, or like how society shapes how we understand ourselves. And then there's also a understanding outside of that hegemonic understanding that we can also embrace, that we can learn from, that we can take advantage of. And I feel like when we say that, well, because white people came up with the term democracy, demos kratos, rule of many, right? Because the etymology literally is just two Greek words, demos kratos, the rule of many. That's it. The concept of the rule of many.
The tension.
What's the tension?
No matter how much you want to argue about the tenets predating, you still got to go back to the roots of the Greek Athens. You have to go back to the etymology of the concept.
Don't have to go back to Greek.
So why?
Don't.
So why do you have to tell me the etymology of Greek, Grecos, meaning rule of many? Like, why does that matter then? It matters because it's a part of the epistemology of democracy.
It's the no. The epistemology, but that's what I'm saying. But we both recognize that it's the epistemology of whiteness that has turned democracy into a tool that can also facilitate slavery.
African communalism is not democracy. African communalism is not democracy. You know what? You've encouraged me though to go get my research bag, and I'll make a video about it. Here's my final question though. Can we reform American democracy? Given everything we've talked about, can we reform American democracy?
Go ahead,
No. And I think the reason why is that there is Grease said, Lee, you're being a nerd, bro. And I say this as a nerd.
Out to try.
La, love it. Said no. Next question. I pray we can, but I really don't know. I think corruption is too high. Honestly, I think we missed the window. I think there have been so many unique opportunities just in our lifetime to make draw a line, create a boundary, to be protective over it. But democracy is for sale. Democracy is being stripped limb for limb. Democracy is off the table. And I think things like Project 2025 are the material concrete unraveling, right? We've also always known that the preacher was also the police officer, was also the KKK member, right? We've always known that the neo-Nazi was always the got a grandson that's a Proud Boy, that got, a nephew that's in the chats on, you know what I'm saying, in the manosphere and this, that, and the other. We all know, right, how intimately and inextricably connected those things are, right? And so I think it was one thing to like let that be the case and let people roam free, but kind of still do our part and take a stance or draw a line and speak out and have movements and stuff like that. But when that vision for this country's democracy was translated directly one-to-one with like policy, and to the extent that it is, with such a voracious appetite to undo so much history and legacy, right? You literally have, we don't even want to see slavery monuments and parks in Philadelphia. Take that shit off the walls. Who is it bothering? Who is it disturbing? Whose spirit is it messing up besides people who don't have a collective vested interest in having perspectives, ideas, understandings of everybody be, part of the day-to-day fabric of our lives, right? So we missed it. I think 2025, and again, like I said earlier, in my mind, I want to chart the time when like the universe, like they're cooked. I do, right? I wish I could plot the time in the history book or on a calendar or something like that when, like I said, the universe, the powers that be was just like, well, that was fucking fun. Next project. But
to be the Emancipation Proclamation. I think that when Abraham Lincoln hung out on Native Americans and freed niggas, it was like, it was a wrap.
We ain't doing shit
like this.
But like, you want me to believe in democracy and the reform of democracy and shit like what we've been, frustrated and protesting about and, outcrying about and shit like that. Democrats today went ahead and, signed or planned, will probably sign to go ahead and keep the government open, right? They gave in. So they're going to fund ICE for more. You know what I'm saying? Like shit like that is just like, what are we talking about?
Only 2 weeks.
Just 2 weeks is going to come and they're going to do what they did 2 weeks ago. And that's, disappoint us again. Right. So democracy for what? Vote for y'all in a minute for what? Right. Like stick around for what? Donald Trump just moseyed down to Georgia and was like, I want all your voting records. I want all that shit. Go ahead and give me what.
Yeah, but that's anti-democratic though. Like we can't say because we claim we
so
can't.
My two eyes and me being able to see what's happening is more anti-democratic than the people doing this.
No,
shit?
I'm saying Donald Trump saying that is anti-democratic. Donald Trump demanding we look at it, it's like. It's the best way to frame it. You know what I mean? It's like we think because they use these terms that their actions legitimize the terms, and it doesn't. Like what like Donald Trump and them doing that is proof of the anti-democratic ways of thinking that comes with white nationalism. And because they have been,
can it be reformed? Yes, these are objective truths. Can it be reformed? Can I have anything? Can the three of us do anything to catalyze enough without being targeted, snuffed out, COINTELPRO, whooped in the street, locked up and told that we migrants and can we do any of that shit? Like that's what I mean. It's just like all of these things are true. All of that is anti-democratic. All of that is the white kiss of death right? The European, Eurocentric, westernized kiss of death to democracy. All of that shit is true. Can it be reformed? Is it redeemable? I think we missed the window. I think the boat
I'm not gonna say.
Shut up, Max.
I'm gonna go to you know I gotta go to Malcolm in the Ballad of the Bullet.
Talk to him, please.
No, I got to.
Where you
Because Malcolm himself said, you can change the government peacefully if you want to. Malcolm said this. Okay.
What's the rest of that statement, nigga?
You can change the government peacefully if you want to. You don't have to be violent. You can change the government peacefully by using the ballot. But then he said, but if you don't use the ballot, you got to use the bullet. but look though. And more one. We are also on the Chop Up page, but we also streaming the Elite channel too. So we on both channels. We on TikTok, we on Instagram, we on Twitter,
we on Facebook.
Yeah, so shout out to all 300 of the folks that's fucking with us. Like, we appreciate y'all being here for sure.
People on Instagram, we can't see y'all. We can't see y'all comments. We are trying to get the people of StreamYard to make sure we can see y'all comments on Instagram and on Twitter as well. We see y'all Twitter comments though. So shout out to everybody tuning in. I think overall we had about like 500 people. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to y'all. Definitely.
Yeah, shout out to everybody. But here's the issue that I run into, right? And the issue I run into is that I'm not going to say that it's not redeemable because of democracy itself. It's not redeemable because white supremacy is a destructive concept even unto itself. White supremacy doesn't allow, white nationalism doesn't allow the fulfillment of democratic principles. That's what gets in the way. So because the foundation of America as a country, as a society, as a culture is entrenched in whiteness, that's why it's not redeemable. But I will always argue that if we conceptualize the concept of governance in a way that mirrors more Igbo tradition and other Central African, ancient African traditions, the type of shit that Lee is saying, oh no, it's not connected to that. It's not the same. Because bro, we're gonna have to just set up the debate. We just gonna have to set up the actual debate. Toya's a great moderator. She's moderated some really good debates. If y'all go check out old Chop Up debates, this is nothing new. Yeah, I mean,
and I just hope y'all never. I've lived a life of watching these niggas go back and forth. So if y'all ever wondering why she's just sitting there, why she don't got it, because you got to number one. This is not an organized debate, and when it's not, you got to pick your windows or your spots. So we'll really be all over the place. But also, and more importantly, we got to direct some traffic. We got to have a central point that we disagree on. We have to have some like just the curation of the conversation is of utmost importance here. But I think there is something to be said in the conversation to be had, about the further and deeper in context about the redeemability of some of these systems.
I think I want to lose idea. I want to lose. I don't want to lose.
Max said 2-on-2. I'll take them. That been my debate partner for the last few years. We'll ride out.
No, me and this nigga can't be on the same side.
This is true. This is true. It would have to be.
Yeah,
here's the last thing I want to let the record show.
I'm to the producer.
I'm gonna be on your side, but you tried to like alienate me and kick me out the club last time, so I don't really. It's hard. And to be clear, that's the other thing I was gonna say about this. I've been on both y'all sides throughout this conversation, right? It's hard to kind of pick a side when there's a lot of truth coming out.
Yeah, I love debate I love debate for that reason because like a ping pong. It's like, ooh, I was with you until this last. Ooh, now I'm on. That's why I really love being on Chop Up. I love talking to y'all. It get my wheels turning. You push me and force me to think about certain things. I'm forced to really be on it. I love this. You know what I'm saying? If y'all enjoy this, make sure y'all come pull up on us every Thursday. Every Thursday night, 9:30-ish. Central Time PM.
7:30 Pacific. Shit.
And to be clear, we got the same timelines. We all watching the same stuff. Our goal is not to regurgitate the news. This is not a news show. Like we not like retailing. We are taking and trying to either zoom in or zoom out a little bit of some of the things that are adjacent to what we're talking about, how we're talking about, you know what I'm saying, like, and the things on our radar, but to add a little more texture, you know what I'm saying, a little bit more context to maybe how you processing what's going down. Big love to Trevor in the building, you know what I'm saying, always pushing, always supporting, always reposting. Like, Trev, we got big love for you around this part.
Does this make sense?
Yeah.
If we can acknowledge there were tenets of democracy that predates Athens, predates Greece.
Yeah.
Can we acknowledge there are tenets of white supremacy that predates the coinage of white supremacy? I would argue that the Athens. We're gonna set the debate up. Because in my mind, if you can say these tenets, they are. Yes, man. The Athens, that was the master signifier of the patriarchal saviors that's gonna civilize. I would argue that the Greeks in Athens, they are the archetype for white supremacist saviorism. That I would argue they birthed white supremacist saviorism in the world in 400, 582 BC when they started talking about the civilization. And they started talking.
No. Okay, no. I understand what you're saying now. They're the progenitors of white supremacy didn't actually use that term. No. I give you that. But nigga, that's my point, nigga. If you can recognize that white supremacy existed before people called it white supremacy, you can recognize that democracy existed before people called it democracy.
And what I'm doing right now, what I'm doing is I'm taking this predate of conception of white supremacy to indict your concept that predates. That's what I'm doing right there. I was trying to indict your shit with mine, like being like, so if you can do this, you can do that. But I don't understand. I think I've already answered the question. I don't think democracy can be, redeemed. I don't think it can be reformed. It's what I say. You know what I'm saying?
Well, hold on. Because let me just finish what I was saying.
No, fuck that. I'm playing.
Nah. So no, American democracy cannot be reformed because its foundation is white nationalism, is white supremacy, is anti-blackness at a bare minimum. It's anti-blackness. So no. However, I do believe that if we reconceptualize, if we become more creative and disconnect our understanding of governance and power away from what we've been.
Yeah, bro, no, nigga, I'm ass. Chill, bro.
I still don't know. I still don't know. And maybe this is probably a question for another time, but how that spills up. The only way I see and I've used the word actualize at least 4 times in this conversation. The only time I see us and Black people being able to actualize this is investments in Black nation building, right? In the community building and organizing that allows for us to reclaim our own kind and our own self-determination, to really have, power, at least in some way on a capitalist level, to organize and develop the pooling of resources together to have shit to make decisions about. The only thing about that is every time you try to do that, and this is as it juxtaposes. Y'all remember last year when they were talking about these white cities that were popping up, like all white cities. One of them is in Missouri that they're trying to create and shit like that. Like I'm saying, that scale up. That's the only type of situation and layout framework that we will have to operationalize and actualize the framework of democracy that the plug is talking about, which I'm here for and I love, right? But we've tried it and we've seen what happens, and we see how when we try to be self-sufficient and self-determined enough, our producer is here telling us we got to wrap it up. We see it in the background of the plug. Shout out to Hugh in the building. But we see that every time we try to self-determine for ourselves and use our forms of democracy to make decisions about what's sustainable for us and our people, that they come and rip that shit up and tear it up. We talk about it at least once a week when we talk about what happens when Black people try to get more organized, is that we turn into Tulsas, we turn into Rosewoods, we turn into, Africa, the Africa family up in Philly. These examples are steadily relevant because under democracy, and this is why it's hard to see it as something that can be reformed. Every time we try to, we even say we're not gonna touch y'all shit. You have it. You do it. You do with that what you want to do. We just gonna do some other shit over here. It comes to our demise, right? It's at the expense of us, our literal existence, because they don't want other oppressed people getting no fancy, funny ideas, right? They don't want to see niggas using, pre-Athenian, African democratic principles to organize themselves, because that'll incite, or at least that's the belief, that it'll incite Latin people, it'll incite Asian folks, it'll incite, you know what I'm saying, Pacific Islanders, it'll incite every other marginalized community population to go ahead and try to do some shit. This also, never mind, my brain be moving too quick. Have y'all any last thoughts before we start to round this conversation out?
My last thoughts is, I think this conversation is a great one that's educational and beneficial for us to be thinking about governmentality, and us to think about how we can take our autonomy back in terms of politics. I feel like history is something that we usually skip over a lot. And I think that if you listen to this conversation, if you're watching this conversation, and any parts of it didn't make any sense, it's because we're getting into a little bit of history mixed in with a little bit of theory. The petty nigga in me want to make sure this is understood.
We'll make sure our ringers are turned off in future shows. We love you all.
Future shows. We will. Actually got my shit on Do Not Disturb. I don't know how they got through. But African communalism and Athenian democracy represent two distinct approaches to governance. The former emphasizes a consensus of holistic community well-being and rational existence. I am because we are. While the latter focuses on direct majoritarian rule by minority male citizens. Athenian democracy and writ large democracy is often exclusionary, excluding women, slaves, and foreigners. So when we start making distinctions between American democracy and the other democracy, nationalist democracy don't want the women to vote, the descendants of slaves to vote, or the foreigners to vote, or be a part of democracy. The same various things for the founders of democracy. They want the same identities to be in there. I think that matters to me. Education is elevation. That's my last thoughts. Looking forward to getting us some theme music on y'all ass. We got some cooking up for y'all. Actually, we got some cooking up for y'all, man. Toya, though, you take us out.
Last thing I want to say, this conversation has been great every Thursday night around 7:30 PST, around 9:30 CST, around 10:30 EST. We're going live. What would that be? MST. Around 8:30 MST. If you in the mountains, come tap in with us. Come on down from the mountains to the Chop Up Show and be a part of it. Thank y'all so much in the comments for tapping in, talking to us. We try to keep track of some of it. Just y'all talking to each other is a big blessing. Here's what I want to leave y'all with. Minnesota still got me pissed. California got me pissed. Shout out to Kevin Porter. The entire country, there's so many names. I think there's 7, 8 total names that we're supposed to be listing. I'm still not well. I still don't feel good. I don't care about none of these conversations. I don't care about the Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem finger pointing. I don't care nothing about Trump backtracking on shit. I'm still hot. And so this has to upscale to a national movement. And tomorrow, a lot of people are saying that it's a day where we can take a chance to start to collect and organize ourselves, to take a swipe at things. Where can you follow us at? We on Instagram. We on Facebook. We on YouTube. Just go in any of those places and type in the Chop Up Show and you should find us. Just type in the Chop Up Show, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all of those places, right? Just type in the Chop Up Show. You're gonna find where we at. Substack is another place where y'all about to start getting some behind the scenes footage, some extra conversations with us independently going live, a whole bunch of interesting things on Substack. So get over there.
And so real fast too. Yeah. The conversation. I saw y'all in the comment section saying that we want, if y'all can give me some readings and I can get on in this. Follow us on Substack. I promise y'all we're gonna be cooking up some peer-reviewed articles that gives you all the material that we talk about, that we reference in these episodes. What we did today, what we do all the time, we try to make sure we give you information. So you're going to have the ability to follow us on Substack and get access to all of the readings, all the articles, all the journals that we reference. Substack.
And even important and interesting social media posts that also, you know what I'm saying, are helping shape and frame some of the conversations that we have. And all of the stuff that we taking in, that we find value in, that we get a lens from, that whether it's actual scholarship, whether it's posts, whether it's other people having intelligent conversations, a lot of it's going to be shared over there. Yeah. Tomorrow, it's talking about scaling up what's been happening in Minneapolis and in Minnesota with boycotts. So if it behooves you, find a way to withhold some of your participation in Civil Society Plug.
Last little bit of breaking news. Democrats. Oh, my son is right here, so I can't say what I was about to say. But them weak Democrats have already capitulated to an emergency, to a short-term funding for ICE
Yeah, we
After
brought that up a couple
threatening
minutes ago, bro. Where was you at?
Yeah. He was on
You
down.
was somewhere else?
He was reading it. He was reading it in.
No, actually, I meant to say it before we got into the conversation. Just quick breaking news, because I got to double check and see if they actually did the vote, because they either was going to do the vote tonight or early tomorrow. But there is currently a plan for Democrats to offer a temporary funding bill for ICE. For ICE, so that they can so to avoid another government shutdown, because they didn't want to turn Democrats didn't want to turn the whole ICE issue into another situation where people not getting paid, people, you know what I'm saying? And you got both sides, one group saying that the other one capitulated. I know most of us leftists and most progressive is like, y'all some hoes.
What you think? Is it bad? Is it good? What you think? If they do it, they sign that shit. Sign out for the people. I don't want to start the conversation. I'm curious what you think, though.
It's some whole shit. I'm sorry. It's some whole shit. Yeah, like I gotta do better with the language.
Hi, y'all.
But yeah. But yeah, so we'll I'm pretty sure we'll get another opportunity to talk about that, but just kind of keeping y'all up to date on what's going on with everything that's happening with ICE. Democrats have already capitulated, and after they said that no, we wasn't gonna allow no ICE funding because y'all killing people. Yeah, they're gonna allow ICE funding because they don't want to get blamed for another government shutdown. So yeah.
Yes. So what I was saying was, in response to that, there is a conversation about national protests or boycotts. So consider not spending any money tomorrow. A lot of people are saying don't go to work, don't go to school, don't spend money. That's not, all three of those may not be an option for you. Realistically, but then find a way to kind of direct some of your funds. I think tomorrow I may end up spending some money, but it is going to be at a Salvadorian restaurant. So I'll be looking straight in the face of the people whose work.
And it won't be at Target. It won't be a Target.
Exactly, right? So there's opportunities to find your place in the movement. Everybody can't necessarily do everything. And this is not a perfect scale up, but it is a rumbling of a conversation that I've been seeing across platforms, across different places and spaces. So things to consider in terms of where you start to put some of your energy. If you like, damn, I'm here and I'm not in Minneapolis, or I'm here and I'm not in LA, or I'm not in some of these other places that's constantly popping up in the news, it's something you can do. You know what I'm saying? Shake the table a little bit. Do what you can.
Shout out.
Do what you can. That's it. Big love to y'all. Thank you so much. Chop Nation. Y'all been in here. Now we out of here. We love y'all. Till next week. Peace.